Guarding My Heart, Part 2. After the confrontation, Lance and I spent the rest of the night at my house. The remnants of Michaela's presence were still lingering, but we did not mind. We both took the night off work and ordered takeout. It was unreal to reward myself with my favorite Chinese restaurant, as my ex-wife frequently held it against me when I indulged in too much food. A man who is a security guard should pride himself in his toned body, not a flabby and big man like yourself, she would comment. That was why it was such a breath of fresh air to be with Lance, who showered me with words of affection and lifted me up, not brought me down. Being here with you feels so surreal, I told him. I never really knew how a home could feel so empty during my marriage, but when you came around and I realized this whole place, I pointed towards the surroundings. It's not really what home is, it's the people in it, so having you here, I know I'm home. We shared a sweet kiss and we continued to cuddle on the couch, exchanging pecks and keeping each other warm. Once our food arrived, we fed each other and enjoyed a night of movies and food. I forgot my problems momentarily, and being in his arms at that moment felt right. Lance did not move in right away, as we felt it was better to have our own space as our relationship was developing. We saw each other at work and, of course, were frequently distracted by each other's presence when on duty. Nonetheless, we still excelled in our work and motivated each other to grind so we would achieve our dreams in unison. Our dynamic was constantly progressing, and I found that it was the little acts that I cherished the most. Lance did not like it when I opened the door for myself. He always insisted on doing it for me. He knew exactly what kind of coffee I wanted and for what weather, and never failed in delivering it to me. As both of us lived in proximity to each other and the building that we were working at, we made it a habit to walk together and enjoy chilly afternoons en route to work, chatting. On days that his mother had enough energy to cook for him, he would save some for me. I was getting used to living by myself. Since I got married to Michaela, I realized I barely had any peace. I would come home to her constant slander and rants, but now I went back to the ambiance of my home, but not for long. Once upon a time, I was head over heels for Michaela, so I knew her ego would never let me kick her out just like that. I knew deep in my gut that the past few weeks of canoodling with Lance and enjoying our honeymoon phase would not last long. Michaela would be out for blood. It was only a matter of time before she came back with a vengeance, and boy was I right. As Lance and I were approaching the security room to report for duty one fine afternoon, we saw a familiar silhouette in the hallway, animatedly speaking to our supervisor, Mr. Gibbs. They did not see us approaching, so we were able to hear their conversation. And Steve did not stop there. Not only did he cheat on me, but he cheated on me with multiple women and men. In fact, we have not gotten to the worst part yet, sir. He is cheating on me with your new employee, Lance. I believe his name is... she ratted out. I honestly do not think this is good for your company. If Steve can do something so vile to me, his wife, what makes you think your company is safe with him as personnel? Ma'am, I have to speak to Steve before I take any further action, Mr. Gibbs replied. I decided to step out of the shadows that moment and make our presence known. I'm here, Mr. Gibbs. I'm willing to explain and debunk every lie she has told you. Excellent, Michaela smirked at the sight of me and Lance. She gestured toward us, as though her point had been proven. See what I mean? They're together. He's been cheating on me. Don't be dramatic, Michaela. You know deep down that this is not true, and neither are any of the accusations you made. You cheated on me with a much younger guy, remember? I admit, I had feelings for Lance Brewing, and I take accountability for that. But I never acted on those feelings until I knew that we were over. No matter how rocky our marriage was, no matter how shitty you were treating me, I soldiered on and stayed in an unhappy marriage. I confessed and I could see Mr. Gibbs studying me, but I swear I could see the empathy in his eyes. I apologize, sir, for the drama and this unnecessary ruckus. I honor our company and would respect your decision if you fire me. But for all my years in service, all I ask is for Lance to retain his job. This was my problem and he got entangled in it. I've known you even before you got married. As a college student, you were here toiling as soon as your classes were over. Never in those years did I have a problem with you, and you're well loved by your colleagues. Therefore, I believe you, and my trust remains with you. You don't have to worry about losing your job, Mr. Gibbs replied. I let out a huge sigh of relief. Lance rubbed my back soothingly and also let out a deep breath. On the flip side, Michaela was seething and was glaring at me and Lance. How could this be? Didn't you hear all the accusations I made? And you'll just turn on a deaf ear at your employees' unethical behavior? What a stupid supervisor you are. Ma'am, you said it yourself. The things you said were merely accusations. If any employee of ours is out of line, I will not hesitate to act. But seeing as how this whole stunt of yours seems like a means to get revenge on your now ex-husband, I will not entertain this. Stupid, you truly are stupid. Can't you see those two gays will clearly do no good for your company? How silly will you look to outsiders accepting two gays as your security personnel? That is beyond disgusting. Lance was about to retaliate, evidently not letting her insult us in front of plenty of people, but Mr. Gibbs held him back and stood up in front of me and Lance, as though physically protecting us from Michaela. Look, the only disgusting thing here is your attitude. How can you bear to shout it out loud to the world that you clearly hold a prejudice against not only Lance and Steve, but gay people in general? Our company is a safe haven for anyone, regardless of how they identify as. Since you clearly cannot respect that, I am demanding you leave. Mr. Gibbs firmly replied. Hanks, escort her out, please. Hanks was another security personnel who was standing nearby. I'm not done with you two gay fucks, shouted Michaela as she was whisked away by Hanks. The three of us stood there, watching as her silhouette disappeared into nothingness, and the surroundings were at peace once again. Mr. Gibbs then turned to me and Lance, shaking his head at what just happened. Get to work, you two. I'm sorry for even entertaining her. Lance suddenly hugged Mr. Gibbs, which took him aback, but he cracked a smile. We should be the ones to say sorry. She disturbed you. I apologize, I said. Don't apologize, both of you. Don't think for a moment I won't defend you or anyone here, really from any aggressors. This is a safe place for all of you. You can be whoever you want to be around me, as long as you get your job done, of course, he joked. Thank you, sir. I always knew you were nice, but I didn't expect this, I admitted. My only child, he's also gay. That's why I go out of my way to make you guys feel safe and welcome, not because I'm the parent of a gay man, but because it's the least I can do as a decent person. I would say it took a week for me to get my rhythm back. I was just starting to get used to life in my own home, void of Michaela's looming presence. When she decided to strike once more, I always knew that she was relentless and would stop at nothing, but these were extremely low blows. She even took to social media to say some nasty stuff about me, writing paragraphs after paragraphs exposing me. However, her sentiments were frowned upon as many friends of mine came to my rescue and explained my side of the story, about how I was the one who was actually cheated on. Although it was good that my friends had my back, I suppose the ultimate loss for her was when her own siblings countered the lies she was telling online. I would consider Michaela's twin brother, Michael, a pretty good friend of mine. He was one of the first people I asked for advice when I found out Michaela's deceit, and he was always given unbiased advice. Despite the subject of my dilemmas being his sister, I always joked about him being the better twin, but perhaps those were not meant to stay as jokes after all. While Michaela was manipulative and often untruthful, Michael was the opposite. He was kind and compassionate, so when his sister started spreading lies about me on the internet, he came to my rescue. It pains my heart to be writing this comment to dispute you, my sister, whom I've shared a womb with for 9 months, and have numerous memories together. But it would pain me more to see Steve, a man who has shown nothing but love to you, be at the receiving end of your never-ending lies. To be clear, the real narrative is Michaela cheated on Steve. She did so repeatedly and heartlessly, while her ex-husband worked to provide her a good future, and while he toiled because he dreamed of having kids, she was cheating on him with a younger man. Steve wanted out, as anyone would. Years of abuse from my sister have built up, and I fully support him in wanting to be free from his grasp. As much as I love my sister, I cannot and will never condone her actions, Michael wrote on Facebook. As the narrative came from Michael's twin brother himself, those who were initially on her side pretty much did a 360, as they should. Soon the tables were turned and some of our mutual friends started lashing out at her in the comments for her low blows towards me. I suppose the backlash got too overwhelming, so Michaela eventually deleted her Facebook post. After her social media stint failed, Michaela attempted to destroy my life once more by taking away something tangible that she knew I valued so deeply. It was the house we once shared. While she was mostly cordial to our neighbors from afar, she talked crap about all of them behind their backs, and only bothered approaching them when she needed something. Hence, when she needed their help, they also did not bother to back her up. Here, this was the very house that I stayed in. Imagine, he'd just dumped all of my stuff out of the house. It was humiliating beyond words. Can you imagine being homeless for the night because your cheating husband kicked you out and you managed to make matters worse by dumping all your belongings outside of your shared home for all your neighbors to see? I had no face to show, cried Michaela, faking tears and sniffling every now and then. I was inside the house getting ready for another day at work when I heard the commotion outside the doorstep. I saw a small group gathered through the peephole. It was a group of 3 police officers and an obviously fake devastated Michaela. Upon hearing the knocking, I opened the door. The officer explained to me the situation as Michaela momentarily took a step back, feigning tears and continuing with her sniffling. Since we were not able to track whose house it really was yet, we may ask you to vacate the premise while we contact the district attorney, until we can determine who truly owns this place and has the right to reside here. Neither of you can claim it your own, explained the officer. I nodded, willing to cooperate if I needed to, because I knew the law was on my side. I owned the house and a lot after all. I had nothing to fear. Michaela, on the other hand, seemed aghast by the idea of calling a lawyer to be the middleman for the commotion she had conjectured. But lawyer? I don't see the need for one. I already testified. I have no place to stay. How can you kick me out of my own home? I turned to the police for help and not to further aggravate the situation, she shouted. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we have to follow the appropriate procedure. Michaela must have spotted the small crowd gathered at stone's throw away from us, peering curiously at the drama that was ensuing. Look, my neighbors can testify. Isn't it enough that we have eyewitnesses to tell you that this is my house? And this man, she pointed at me, he's trespassing. Isn't that grounds to arrest him, officers? If you have proof that he is indeed trespassing, we can bring him to the nearest police station, where he can explain and call his law. Michaela was not having any of it. She addressed the crowd and asked them to step up to defend her, in hopes that she would finally get me arrested. I knew she would not be able to handle the shame of being in the front yard, attempting to get me arrested, only to fail. Mrs. Wilson, she called out to one of the neighbors. Tell them how you bore witness to Steve's domestic abuse and how he cheated on me relentlessly. Tell them how he kicked me out of my own house, out of the blue. Stand up for your fellow woman. Mrs. Wilson looked extremely uncomfortable, and she peered at me. We did not interact much, seeing as I was almost never home because I always worked long hours, but I was amiable with her whenever we bumped into each other. I carried her groceries whenever I could, greeted her whenever I passed by her house, so when she spoke up in my defense, I was elated. I do not know Steve much, but the few times we have spoken, he has shown nothing but kindness to me. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the other neighbors when I say he's a very soft-spoken man who seems to constantly get dragged around by you. Don't think you can deceive us with your forced smiles and half-hearted greetings, Michaela. We hear you shout at him and hurl insult after insult at him, Mrs. Wilson affirmed. Nods and hums of approval reverberated throughout the small crowd, and it seemed to enrage Michaela more. Never had I seen her looking that humiliated. And for the record, I did not see him kicking you out, another neighbor named Mr. Fregg added. If anything, I peeped him seeing you out, quiet and peaceful, while you continued to rudely and loudly make comments about him. The police officer seemed convinced enough by the testimonies of the neighbors, and had started backing out. Plus, I've lived here all my life, and I can attest that Steve is the rightful owner. His late parents bought this lot from way back, and I remember him building the house when he finished college, Mr. Henderson, an elderly neighbor, added. Clearly defeated, Michaela was whisked away by the police officers, and I could hear them warning her of trespassing and being a public nuisance if she tried another stunt like this. The neighbors were also cautioned not to entertain her. She said no more, and it's clear that she has exhausted every means to ruin my life, and has desperately failed. In contrast, she was ruining her own life through her self-destructive means. Months passed, and I no longer heard from Michaela. The plot to take over my house and turn my neighbors against me seemed like her last straw, as she never attempted any other antics since then. Last I heard, she had fled town too, humiliated by her own embarrassing deeds. Her cheating scandal had tarnished her reputation, and the word about her seeking revenge was the icing on the cake. She had no face to show anymore. Finally at ease, Lance moved to my house. I felt relieved to have company once again on our days off. We went furniture shopping and made do-it-yourself home decors together as a means of de-stressing. I learned that Lance was an excellent baker, and whenever he was free, he would attempt to teach me a recipe or two. Being a natural disaster in the kitchen, I flopped miserably, so I just opted to watch him. Between the two of us, you're clearly the better cook and baker, so just accept it, babe, I remarked one day as he was mixing a bowl of ingredients. I was resting my chin on his shoulder and hugging him from behind. All you do is eat, he said. I wash the dishes too. Hey, I defended myself. Plus, when you can't reach the shelf, I'm the one helping you, right? He rolled his eyes playfully and turned to me. He was giving me those baby eyes that I just could not resist. What? I asked. Speaking of not reaching the shelf, can you help me take a can of peaches? He implored with a slight pout. I kissed his lips softly and let out a loud howl. I knew it, vertically challenged, I teased. Lance rolled his eyes again and pretended to be mad at my insult, but I could see a small hint of a smile. I hate you, always subtly taking jabs at me, he said. I kissed him square on the lips again and rubbed our noses against each other. No you don't, you love me, I insisted, and I love you. Ugh, you're so obnoxious, Lance replied, but yes, I love you. Living together had never been this easy. I expected a lot of adjustments, but Lance and I just fit so well. Like two pieces of a puzzle, that things just flowed easily. We relished doing grocery shopping together, and it became routinely for us to go whenever we had days off. We need a list, Lance insisted as he sat down in the living room before we left for the grocery. But why would we need a list? We're good just grabbing what we please, babe. I dragged him down on the couch with me and cuddled on his side. We need to budget, otherwise we'll just grab whatever we want, he countered. Plus, with your appetite, we really will go over the budget if we don't have a list. I pinched his cheeks and then his nose. Look at this cute little baby, always wanting things in order, I teased. He pushed me jokingly and pretended to be mad by folding his arms. And look at this big baby in front of me, always eating and always so disorderly, he jested, right back. I chuckled at his comment. Babe, you still love me despite all my flaws, I replied. Lance then pulled me closer, thinking I was serious. He showered me with kisses all over my face, eventually ending with a soft and sweet kiss on the lips. I'll always love you despite your flaws, he replied. I was joking, okay? I don't even see those traits as yours as flaws. I love you for who you are, no buts. Moments like this were what I treasured the most, and I was initially aghast that someone was so capable of loving me that much and being that sincere towards me. I was used to my ex-wife's criticisms and backhanded comments, so having Lance's reassurance and uplifting words did a lot to my self-esteem. I deserved to be loved, and he made me feel exactly that. Lance and I continued to work as security personnel. We worked hard in the nighttime and spent time together in the day. We also had been visiting his mother religiously. As Lance was getting enough income from our job, she was able to go off for her treatments without fail, and it was doing her body good. During our day off, we went to her house for a nice meal. Hi Mama, greeted Lance. His mom had a lot of energy today, and she cooked a decent spread of food for us. My sons, she greeted us. To my surprise, she hugged me first and skipped Lance. How are you, my boy? Good, Mom. How are you? Feeling okay today? I brought you some of the cupcakes you really like, I replied. She was overjoyed as I handed her the box of cupcakes from the nearby bakery that she adored. Lance rarely let her eat sweets as she was so conscious of her blood sugar rising, but I let her indulge every now and then, which was a gesture she appreciated so much. See, this is why you're my favorite son, she joked. Lance rolled his eyes playfully, but he was smiling. I knew how much this meant to him, seeing his mother happy. He was so relieved that I was willing to look after his mom alongside him. On days that he wanted to rest, I took over and visited her. It was a great relief for him, and she said it was like a massive chip was removed from his shoulder. All his life, he had been the sole person to take care of his mom. Now he had me to help him. I was ecstatic knowing that he did not feel alone anymore. I admired him for his hard work and perseverance, and I firmly believed that he did not deserve to be stressing over her well-being that much, so I helped out whenever I could. The three of us headed towards the kitchen. I had my big hands on Lance's smaller one and gave it a squeeze. Whenever we were together, we seemed inseparable, and his mother noticed it right away. Two of you can't even spend 1 second apart, commented Gina, Lance's mother. We both laughed. Your love is so pure, my sons, she said as she settled down. I'm so happy to see you two happy. Finally, my Lance isn't frowning every second of every day anymore. I laughed, and Lance playfully glared at his mom. We shared a good chat throughout dinner as we feasted on the home-cooked meals Gina prepared. She made sure to include some beef stew, which was my favorite. How about mac and cheese, Mama? Inquired Lance. I can't believe you're out here making my boyfriend's favorite dishes and me, your own son, gets ignored. Well, it seems like I'm the favorite son, I joked. I'll make mac and cheese the next time both of you come over for dinner. You're both my favorite, replied Gina sweetly, as she pinched Lance's cheeks. Anyway, I have good news. What is it? I asked. I got the test results, she revealed. Lance and I accompanied her to get some lab work done a few days ago. Doc said all clear and I have my final treatment in a few days. After that, I just have to take some maintenance and I'm a free woman. Lance stood up to hug her, elated at the good news. We also have good news ourselves, Lance said. What? We've been promoted as senior security officers, we announced in unison. Gina enveloped us both in a hug, her eyes brimming with tears. My sons, I'm so proud of you. Look at you two, so successful and happy. We spent the rest of the night demolishing Gina's home-cooked meals while we relished the wine gifted to us by our boss, Mr. Gibbs, to congratulate us for our promotion. I could not believe that this was my life. Finally, Michaela was out of the picture and I was at peace. I had the title to the lot I inherited from my parents, and she could not take that away from me anymore. I was living in my house with my boyfriend, who also happened to be my workmate, and we had recently been promoted. I was building good ties with my neighbors who felt really bad that Michaela had tried to ruin my good image. They invited me and Lance for barbecues sometimes to get to know each other better. Lance's mother was finally healthy again and no longer needed treatment. Everything was falling into place, and after a hell of a year, I could not be happier to say that I was at peace. Finally, I have secured my happiness. The end. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.